Karen loved rules. Not just any rules, but the specific, often ridiculous, rules of the Harmony Oaks Homeowners Association. She practically breathed the HOA guidelines, knew every clause by heart, and considered herself the neighborhood's self-appointed guardian of order. Some folks called her difficult, others used stronger language, but Karen didn't care. She was simply upholding standards, ensuring property values remained high, and keeping Harmony Oaks harmonious, at least, in her opinion. Her house was immaculate, the lawn a perfect shade of green, and her flower beds meticulously arranged according to the HOA-approved list of flora. Woe betide anyone whose mailbox was even slightly askew or whose holiday decorations went up a day early. Karen would be on it, armed with a printed violation notice and a stern lecture. She spent a considerable amount of her free time patrolling the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, searching for infractions. A rogue dandelion in Mrs. Henderson's lawn. Noted. A basketball hoop left out overnight at the Millers. Documented with photographic evidence. Mr. Johnson's slightly overgrown hedges. A formal complaint was already in the mail. Karen saw herself as a pillar of the community, a vital force preventing the slide into suburban anarchy. Her husband, Bob, often retreated to the garage during her patrols, muttering about needing to check the tire pressure or organize the tools, but Karen pressed on, undeterred. She was doing important work, even if no one else seemed to appreciate it. The recent sale of the old Thompson place had been a source of considerable excitement, and apprehension, for Karen. The Thompsons had been relatively lax in their adherence to HOA rules, often letting their lawn grow a bit too long or occasionally parking a car on the street overnight. Karen had issued them several warnings over the years, which they mostly ignored. Now, a new family was moving in, and Karen was determined to make sure they understood the importance of following the rules. She had already prepared a welcome packet, complete with a highlighted copy of the HOA guidelines, a list of approved paint colors, and a sternly worded letter about trash can placement. She was ready to mold these newcomers into model Harmony Oaks residents, whether they liked it or not. She watched from her window as a moving truck pulled up to the Thompson place. This was her moment. As the moving truck rumbled to a halt, Karen clutched her welcome packet, her eyes scanning every detail. She noticed a slightly dented garbage can, a clear violation, but decided to save that for later. For now, she needed to focus on making a good first impression, albeit a firmly rule-oriented one. A man emerged from the truck, tall and broad-shouldered, with a friendly smile. He wore jeans and a t-shirt, hardly the picture of a compliant HOA member. Karen frowned slightly. He began directing the movers, his voice carrying a surprising amount of authority. As the movers began unloading boxes, Karen's keen eyes spotted something that sent a jolt of indignation through her. A small section of a neatly stacked pile of firewood seemed to be encroaching onto the narrow strip of land designated as HOA common area, a sliver of grass that separated the properties. It was only a few inches, maybe a foot at most, but it was a violation nonetheless. This was unacceptable. Karen couldn't let this blatant disregard for property lines go unaddressed. She marched out of her house, the welcome packet clutched tightly in her hand, her face set in a determined expression. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp and authoritative. The man turned, his friendly smile still in place. "Yes?" he asked, his tone polite. "I'm Karen," she announced, as if that explained everything. "I'm a resident here, and I'm also on the HOA board." "Nice to meet you, Karen," the man replied. "I'm Tom Thompson." "There seems to be a slight issue with the placement of your firewood," Karen said, pointing to the offending pile. "It appears to be encroaching onto HOA property." Tom looked at the firewood, then back at Karen. "Oh, that little bit? I didn't realize it was over the line. We'll move it shortly." "It needs to be moved immediately," Karen insisted. HOA regulations clearly state that no personal property can be placed on common areas. It's a matter of maintaining the aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood and preventing potential liability issues. Tom sighed, his smile fading slightly. Look, Karen, we're still unpacking. I promise we'll take care of it as soon as we can. I'm afraid that's not good enough, Karen said, her voice rising in pitch. The rules are the rules. It needs to be moved now. She tapped the welcome packet against her hand for emphasis. I have a copy of the regulations right here, if you'd like to review them. Tom Thompson's patience began to wear thin. He understood the importance of following rules, but Karen's insistence on immediate compliance over a few inches of firewood seemed excessive, especially considering they were in the middle of moving in. Karen, he said, trying to remain calm, with all due respect, I have a lot on my plate right now. The firewood will be moved. I promise. Can we please just leave it at that for now? Karen stood her ground, her arms crossed. I'm afraid I can't do that, Mr. Thompson. As an HOA board member, it's my responsibility to enforce the rules. If the firewood isn't moved within 1 hour, I will be forced to issue a formal violation notice, which could result in fines. Tom's eyes narrowed slightly. An hour? For a few inches of firewood? Rules are rules, Mr. Thompson, Karen repeated, her voice unwavering. I'm giving you 1 hour. If it's not moved by then, I will take further action. She turned and marched back towards her house, leaving Tom standing beside the moving truck, shaking his head in disbelief. As Karen walked away, she felt a sense of satisfaction. She had asserted her authority and made it clear that she wouldn't tolerate any deviations from the HOA guidelines. This new neighbor would learn quickly that Harmony Oaks was a community of order and regulations, and she was the one who ensured it stayed that way. Back inside her house, Karen glanced at the clock. 1 hour. She set a timer on her phone, ready to pounce the moment it went off. She imagined Tom scrambling to move the firewood, finally understanding the seriousness of his transgression. Meanwhile, Tom Thompson stared at the retreating figure of Karen, a mixture of amusement and frustration on his face. He couldn't believe the level of intensity over such a trivial matter. He considered moving the firewood just to avoid further confrontation, but a stubborn streak in him refused to give in to her unreasonable demands. He decided to wait and see what she would actually do. He had more important things to worry about than a few inches of firewood. He went back to directing the movers, trying to ignore the ticking clock in Karen's house. He had a feeling this was just the beginning of his interactions with his overly enthusiastic neighbor. The hour passed slowly for Karen. She paced back and forth, peeking through her curtains every few minutes to check on the firewood. Tom Thompson seemed to be deliberately ignoring her ultimatum, continuing to unload boxes and chat with the movers as if nothing was amiss. Her frustration grew with each passing minute. As the timer on her phone finally buzzed, Karen felt a surge of righteous anger. She grabbed her clipboard, a pre-printed violation notice, and a camera, ready to document Tom's blatant disregard for the rules. She stormed out of her house, her heels clicking loudly on the pavement. She marched directly to Tom, who was now sitting on his porch steps, drinking a bottle of water. "Mr. Thompson," she exclaimed, her voice filled with indignation. "The hour is up, and the firewood is still there. I am now issuing you a formal violation notice." She thrust the notice towards him. Tom took the notice, glanced at it briefly, and then tossed it onto the porch beside him. "Okay, Karen," he said calmly. "I've got a lot going on right now. I'll get to it when I get to it." Karen's face turned red. "You can't just ignore this. This is a serious violation. You are trespassing on HOA land, and I demand that you remove your belongings immediately." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Trespassing? Karen, I own this property. How can I be trespassing on my own land?" "That sliver of land belongs to the HOA," Karen insisted. "It's clearly marked on the property map. Your firewood is illegally placed on common property, and I am ordering you to vacate that area within 1 hour." Tom chuckled softly. "Vacate? Karen, you're being ridiculous. I'm not going anywhere. Karen's anger reached its boiling point. "Fine," she shrieked. "If you refuse to comply, I have no choice but to call the authorities. You are in violation of HOA rules and trespassing on common property. I will not tolerate this blatant disregard for the law." She pulled out her phone and began dialing, her finger trembling with rage. "I'm calling the police right now. They'll sort you out." Tom sighed deeply and stood up. "Karen, you're making a big mistake," he said, his voice low and warning. "This isn't worth it." But Karen was beyond reasoning with. She was on a mission to enforce the rules, and nothing was going to stop her. She continued to dial, her eyes fixed on Tom, a triumphant smirk on her face. He would soon learn that Karen always got her way. Karen spoke to the 911 operator, her voice a mixture of urgency and self-righteousness. "I need to report a trespassing incident," she stated, emphasizing each word. "My new neighbor is illegally placing his belongings on HOA common property and refusing to comply with my demands to remove them. I am an HOA board member, and I have issued him a formal violation notice, but he is refusing to cooperate." She provided the operator with Tom's address and a detailed description of the trespassing, firewood. She also made sure to mention that Tom was being uncooperative and disrespectful. The operator assured her that officers would be dispatched to the scene shortly. Karen hung up the phone, a feeling of triumph washing over her. Justice would soon be served. Meanwhile, Tom watched Karen with a bemused expression. He couldn't believe she had actually called the police over something so trivial. He knew he was within his rights, but he also knew that dealing with the police could be a hassle, even when you were in the right. He calmly walked over to the stack of firewood and began moving it, inch by inch, onto his property. He didn't want to give Karen any further ammunition to use against him. "There," he said, wiping his brow. "Is that better, Karen?" Karen glared at him. "It should have been done an hour ago," she snapped. "But it's too late now. The police are already on their way." Tom sighed. "Karen, you really didn't have to do this. This is a waste of everyone's time." "Rules are rules, Mr. Thompson," Karen retorted. "And you broke them. You'll learn to respect the authority of the HOA in Harmony Oaks." Tom shook his head and walked back to his porch, waiting for the police to arrive. He hoped they would be reasonable and see how ridiculous the situation was. He also hoped that Karen would finally realize the absurdity of her actions and back down. But deep down, he knew that was unlikely. Karen was on a mission, and she wouldn't rest until she had won. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text message to a friend. "Crazy neighbor called the cops on me for trespassing with firewood. You won't believe this." He knew he'd have a good story to tell later, regardless of how this ended. He sat down, took a deep breath, and waited for the sirens. The sound of sirens grew louder, signaling the imminent arrival of law enforcement. Karen straightened her dress, smoothed her hair, and practiced her most authoritative expression. She wanted to make sure she presented herself as a credible and reliable witness. She watched as a police car pulled up to the curb, its flashing lights illuminating the street. 2 officers emerged from the vehicle, their uniforms crisp and professional. Karen felt a surge of satisfaction. Finally, someone was going to take her seriously and put an end to Tom Thompson's blatant disregard for the rules. As the officers approached, Karen stepped forward, ready to explain the situation. "Officers," she began, her voice brimming with importance, "I'm Karen, and I'm the one who called. My new neighbor, Mr. Thompson, has been trespassing on HOA common property and refusing to comply with my demands to remove his belongings." She pointed dramatically to the now neatly stacked firewood, which was entirely on Tom's property. "As you can see, he was illegally placing his firewood on that strip of land, which is designated as HOA common area. I issued him a formal violation notice, but he refused to cooperate. I had no choice but to call you." One of the officers, a young woman with a serious expression, nodded politely. "Thank you, ma'am. We'll take it from here. Karen beamed, confident that the officers would quickly resolve the situation in her favor. She watched as they approached Tom, who was still sitting calmly on his porch. She couldn't wait to see the look on his face when he was finally held accountable for his actions. She imagined the officers sternly lecturing him about the importance of following HOA rules, issuing him a hefty fine, and ordering him to remove any remaining items from the common area. She might even suggest they check his garbage cans for violations while they were at it. Karen was certain that this incident would serve as a valuable lesson to Tom Thompson and any other new residents who dared to challenge the authority of the Harmony Oaks Homeowners Association. She was the guardian of order, and she would not tolerate any deviations from the established rules. She stood tall, her chest puffed out with pride, ready to witness the triumph of justice. This was going to be a good day for Harmony Oaks, and especially for Karen. Karen watched with bated breath as the two officers approached Tom. She could hear snippets of their conversation, but couldn't quite make out the words. She saw the female officer extend her hand to Tom, and Tom shook it with a warm smile. Karen frowned slightly. The interaction seemed a little too friendly for someone who was supposedly being accused of trespassing. Then, she heard something that made her jaw drop. "Sheriff Thompson," the male officer said, his voice respectful. "It's good to see you, sir." "Sheriff Thompson?" Karen's mind raced. What was going on? The female officer added, "Welcome to Harmony Oaks, Sheriff. We're glad to have you in the neighborhood." Karen's triumphant smirk vanished, replaced by a look of utter confusion. "Sheriff? What sheriff?" Tom Thompson was the sheriff? It couldn't be. She must have misheard. She took a step closer, straining to hear the conversation. "We just wanted to check in and make sure everything was all right, Sheriff," the male officer continued. "We received a call about a possible trespassing incident, but it seems like everything is under control." Tom chuckled. "Yes, officer, everything is fine. Just a slight misunderstanding with my neighbor. I've already taken care of it." He glanced at Karen with a knowing smile. The female officer turned to Karen, her expression now noticeably less polite. "Ma'am," she said, her voice firm, "is there anything else we can assist you with?" Karen stammered, I thought he was trespassing." "As the sheriff explained, ma'am, it was just a misunderstanding," the officer replied. "It appears that the firewood is now entirely on his property." "Is there anything else?" Karen was speechless. She couldn't believe what was happening. The police were siding with Tom Thompson. And he was the sheriff? Her meticulously planned triumph was crumbling before her eyes. She mumbled, No, nothing else." "All right then," the officer said. "Have a good day, ma'am." She turned back to Tom. "Sheriff, if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call." The officers turned and walked back to their patrol car, leaving Karen standing on the sidewalk, dumbfounded. As they drove away, Karen could feel the eyes of several neighbors peering out from their windows. She knew they had all witnessed her humiliating defeat. This was not how she had envisioned her day ending. Karen stood there, mortified, as the patrol car disappeared down the street. The whispers from the neighbors were almost louder than the retreating sirens. She could feel their judgment, their amusement, and perhaps even a little bit of glee at her misfortune. She slowly turned towards Tom, who was now leaning against his porch railing, a slight smirk playing on his lips. He looked every bit the confident and capable sheriff, not the trespassing rule-breaker she had imagined. "Well, Karen," he said, his voice calm and even, "it seems like there's been a bit of a misunderstanding." Karen couldn't bring herself to speak. She was still trying to process the fact that she had just called the police on the newly elected sheriff, her neighbor, over a few inches of firewood. The absurdity of the situation was almost too much to bear. "I probably should have mentioned it earlier," Tom continued, "but I was just elected sheriff last month. It's been a bit of a whirlwind, and moving into the Thompson place was just one more thing on my to-do list." He paused, then added with a hint of amusement, "I guess I didn't make the best first impression, did I?" Karen finally found her voice, but it was barely a whisper. "Sheriff? You're the sheriff?" Tom nodded. "That's right. Tom Thompson, Sheriff of Harmony County. At your service." He gave her a mock salute. Karen's mind was reeling. Everything she thought she knew about the situation had been turned upside down. She had been so focused on enforcing the HOA rules that she had completely overlooked the possibility that there might be more to the story. I had no idea," she stammered. "I can see that," Tom replied, his tone softening slightly. "Look, Karen, I appreciate your dedication to the community and your commitment to upholding the rules. But sometimes, it's important to take a step back and consider the bigger picture." He gestured towards the now neatly stacked firewood. Was that really worth calling the police over? Was it really worth creating a scene in front of the entire neighborhood? Karen hung her head in shame. She knew he was right. She had let her obsession with the HOA rules cloud her judgment and had acted rashly and unreasonably. I'm sorry," she mumbled. Tom smiled. "Apology accepted, Karen. Now, how about we start over? Maybe we can have a cup of coffee sometime and talk about how we can work together to make Harmony Oaks an even better place to live. As long as the firewood stays on my property, of course." Karen managed a weak smile. "I'd like that," she said. Perhaps this wasn't the end of the world after all. Maybe, just maybe, she could learn something from this experience and become a better neighbor. And maybe, just maybe, she could even find a way to use her passion for rules to make a positive impact on the community, instead of just annoying everyone. But first, she had to face the music with the HOA board. She had a feeling they weren't going to be too happy about her calling the police on the sheriff. The next morning, Karen braced herself for the inevitable fallout from her disastrous encounter with Sheriff Thompson. She knew the HOA board wouldn't be pleased, and she was right. Her phone rang incessantly, each call more accusatory than the last. Finally, she answered a call from Agnes, the HOA president, a woman known for her sharp tongue and even sharper sense of self-importance. "Karen." Agnes's voice boomed through the phone. "What in the world possessed you to call the police on the sheriff? Do you have any idea the embarrassment you've caused the HOA? Karen tried to explain, but Agnes cut her off. "I don't want to hear it. You've made us look like a bunch of petty, power-hungry busybodies. The whole county is laughing at us." "But Agnes," Karen protested, "he was trespassing. The firewood. The firewood is irrelevant." Agnes shrieked. "The point is, you escalated a minor issue into a major crisis. You acted without thinking, and now we're all paying the price." Agnes informed Karen that she was being suspended from the HOA board, effective immediately. She was also facing a hefty fine for misuse of HOA resources and for bringing the association into disrepute. Karen was devastated. She had dedicated so much of her time and energy to the HOA, and now she was being punished for it. She felt betrayed and unfairly treated. As if that wasn't bad enough, Karen also received a visit from 2 detectives later that day. They informed her that they were investigating allegations of misuse of HOA funds and abuse of power. Several residents had come forward with complaints about Karen's overzealous enforcement of the rules and her alleged use of HOA funds for personal gain. Karen was shocked. She had never intentionally misused HOA funds, but she had occasionally used the association's resources for personal tasks, such as printing flyers for her garage sale or using the HOA's postage meter for her Christmas cards. She had never thought of it as a big deal, but now it seemed like it could be a serious problem. The detectives asked her a series of questions about her activities on the HOA board, her spending habits, and her relationships with other residents. Karen tried to cooperate, but she could sense that they were skeptical of her answers. As the detectives left, Karen felt a deep sense of dread. Her life was spiraling out of control. She had gone from being a respected member of the community to a pariah, facing suspension from the HOA, a hefty fine, and a possible criminal investigation. All because of a few inches of firewood. She sank into her couch, overwhelmed with despair. It seemed her HOA power trip was finally coming to an end, and not in the way she had imagined. The investigation into Karen's activities dragged on for weeks. The detectives interviewed numerous residents, poring over HOA documents and bank statements. They uncovered a pattern of questionable spending and a clear abuse of power. It turned out that Karen had been using her position on the HOA board to settle personal scores, targeting residents who had crossed her in some way. She had issued frivolous violation notices, levied unwarranted fines, and even initiated legal action against those who dared to challenge her authority. She'd also been subtly siphoning funds, justifying it as administrative expenses. Small amounts here and there, but it added up over time. Lunches, gas, even a new printer for her HOA work that was mostly used for personal projects. As the evidence mounted, Karen's anxiety grew. She knew she was in trouble, but she refused to admit the extent of her wrongdoing. She convinced herself that she could explain everything away, that she could somehow salvage her reputation and avoid serious consequences. Meanwhile, Sheriff Thompson had settled into his new role in the community. He was a visible and approachable leader, attending neighborhood events and working to build relationships with residents. He made it a point to be fair and impartial, treating everyone with respect, regardless of their background or social standing. He even made an effort to be friendly with Karen, offering her a wave or a polite greeting whenever he saw her. But Karen avoided him, consumed by guilt and shame. She knew she had wronged him, and she couldn't bring herself to face him. One afternoon, Sheriff Thompson stopped by Karen's house. He knocked on the door, and after a moment of hesitation, Karen opened it. "Karen," he said, his voice gentle, "I know you're going through a tough time right now. I just wanted to let you know that I don't hold any grudges. What happened with the firewood was a misunderstanding, and I'm willing to put it behind us." Karen was taken aback by his kindness. "Thank you, Tom," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "That means a lot to me. I also wanted to encourage you to cooperate with the investigation," Tom continued. "The truth will come out eventually, and it's better to be honest and upfront about everything." Karen nodded. "I know," she said. "I'm trying to do the right thing." Tom smiled. "I believe you are, Karen. Just remember, everyone makes mistakes. What matters is how you learn from them and how you move forward." He paused, then added, "And Karen, maybe lay off the HOA rules for a while. Focus on being a good neighbor, not just a rule enforcer." Karen smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in weeks. "I think I can do that," she said. As Tom walked away, Karen felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could turn her life around and find redemption. It wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to try. The first step was to tell the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And maybe, just maybe, she could finally learn the true meaning of community. The Harmony Oaks HOA board meeting was a tense affair. The room was packed with residents, many of whom were eager to voice their complaints about Karen's behavior. Agnes, the HOA president, struggled to maintain order as accusations flew back and forth. Karen sat quietly in the back, her head hung low. She knew she was the target of their anger, and she didn't blame them. She had let them down, and she was prepared to face the consequences. The main topic of discussion was Karen's suspension and the allegations of misuse of funds. Several residents demanded that she be permanently removed from the board and that the HOA pursue legal action to recover the stolen money. Agnes, trying to regain control of the meeting, announced that the HOA had hired an independent auditor to review the financial records and determine the full extent of Karen's wrongdoing. She also stated that the HOA was cooperating fully with the police investigation. Just as the meeting seemed to be reaching a fever pitch, Sheriff Thompson entered the room. His presence immediately silenced the crowd. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "I understand that you're discussing the situation with Karen, and I wanted to offer my perspective." He explained that he had spoken with Karen and that she had expressed remorse for her actions. He also stated that he believed she was genuinely committed to making amends. "I'm not here to defend Karen's behavior," he continued. "She made some mistakes, and she needs to be held accountable for them. But I also believe in giving people a second chance. I hope that you'll consider that as you decide how to move forward." Sheriff Thompson then addressed the issue of the HOA funds. He stated that he had spoken with the detectives in charge of the investigation and that Karen had agreed to cooperate fully with their inquiry. "I have reason to believe that she will return any funds that she may have misused," he said. "I urge you to allow the legal process to take its course and to avoid making any rash decisions that could jeopardize the investigation." He also offered to mediate between Karen and the HOA, hoping to facilitate a resolution that would be fair to everyone involved. His words had a calming effect on the crowd. Many residents seemed to be swayed by his reasonable and compassionate approach. After Sheriff Thompson left the meeting, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The anger and animosity began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. The HOA board agreed to postpone any further action against Karen until the auditor had completed the review and the police investigation had concluded. They also agreed to consider Sheriff Thompson's offer to mediate. As Karen left the meeting, she felt a renewed sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to make things right and earn back the trust of her neighbors. It wouldn't be easy, but she was willing to try. She had a long road ahead of her, but she was no longer alone. Sheriff Thompson had given her a second chance, and she was determined to make the most of it. The mediation process, facilitated by Sheriff Thompson, was long and difficult. Karen had to face the residents she had wronged, listen to their grievances, and apologize for her actions. It was a humbling and painful experience, but it was also necessary for her healing and redemption. She agreed to repay the HOA for the funds she had misused, even though it meant selling some of her prized possessions. She also resigned from the HOA board permanently, acknowledging that she was no longer fit to serve in that capacity. As part of the mediation agreement, Karen also had to undergo anger management counseling in complete community service. She spent several hours each week volunteering at a local soup kitchen, serving meals to the homeless and working alongside people from all walks of life. Through her community service, Karen gained a new perspective on the world. She realized that there were more important things in life than HOA rules and perfectly manicured lawns. She learned to appreciate the value of compassion, empathy, and human connection. She also began to develop genuine friendships with some of the people she had previously dismissed as rule-breakers or troublemakers. She discovered that they were kind, caring, and generous individuals who had simply made different choices than she had. One day, while volunteering at the soup kitchen, Karen ran into Sheriff Thompson. He was there helping to serve meals, just like everyone else. "Karen," he said, smiling warmly. "It's good to see you here." "It's good to see you too, Tom," Karen replied. "I'm really enjoying this. It's been a life-changing experience for me." "I'm glad to hear that," Tom said. "I always knew you had a good heart, Karen. You just needed to find a way to let it shine." They worked side by side for the rest of the afternoon, serving meals and chatting with the guests. As they cleaned up afterwards, Karen felt a sense of peace and contentment that she hadn't experienced in years. She had finally found her purpose in life, not as a rule enforcer, but as a servant to others. She had learned that true community wasn't about following rules, it was about building relationships and helping those in need. As she walked home that evening, Karen realized that she had been given a gift, a chance to start over and create a new life for herself. And she was determined to make the most of it. Harmony Oaks, and Karen herself, was finally becoming a place of true harmony. The HOA power trip was over, and a new chapter was beginning. Years passed. Harmony Oaks thrived under Sheriff Thompson's leadership. He fostered a sense of community, encouraging neighborliness and cooperation. He quietly amended some of the more ridiculous HOA rules, much to the relief of many residents. Karen, a changed woman, became an active member of the community, volunteering her time and resources to various causes. She even started a neighborhood watch program, but this time, her approach was collaborative and supportive, not authoritarian. One sunny afternoon, Sheriff Thompson was walking down the street when he saw Karen tending her garden. He stopped to chat, admiring her colorful flowers. "You've done a wonderful job with your garden, Karen," he said. "It really brightens up the neighborhood." "Thank you, Tom," Karen replied, smiling. "Gardening has become my therapy. It helps me to relax and appreciate the beauty of nature." They talked for a while about gardening, the weather, and the latest community events. As they were about to say goodbye, Tom paused and looked at Karen thoughtfully. "You know, Karen," he said, "I've been thinking about something. You have a real talent for organization and a passion for making things better. Have you ever considered running for a position on the city council?" Karen was surprised by his suggestion. "Me? On the city council? I don't think I'm qualified." "Nonsense," Tom said. "You've learned a lot over the past few years, and you have a unique perspective to offer. You understand the importance of community, the need for fairness, and the value of cooperation. I think you'd be a great asset to the city council." Karen hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Well, Tom," she said, "you've given me something to think about. Maybe it's time for me to take on a new challenge." A few months later, Karen announced her candidacy for city council. She ran a positive and inclusive campaign, focusing on issues that mattered to the community. She emphasized the importance of collaboration, compromise, and finding common ground. To everyone's surprise, including her own, Karen won the election. She became a respected and effective member of the city council, working tirelessly to improve the lives of her constituents. And so, Karen's story came full circle. She had gone from being a despised HOA enforcer to a beloved community leader, all thanks to a little bit of humility, a lot of hard work, and the kindness of a forgiving neighbor. Harmony Oaks, and the city beyond, had truly found harmony, guided by a sheriff who believed in second chances and a woman who had learned to embrace the true meaning of community. Her HOA power trip had ended, but her journey of service had just begun. The officer, a stern-faced woman named Officer Miller, addressed Karen directly. "Ma'am, while we appreciate you calling to report what you believe to be a crime, it's important to understand the implications of misusing emergency services. In this case, it appears your neighbor was well within his rights, and the situation did not warrant police intervention." She paused, then continued, her voice even more serious. "Furthermore, we've received several complaints about your behavior as an HOA board member, including allegations of harassment and misuse of HOA funds. Because of this, we'll be issuing you a citation for misuse of emergency services, and we will also be opening a formal investigation into your activities with the HOA. These complaints will be thoroughly reviewed." Karen's face paled. She had been so focused on enforcing the rules that she hadn't considered the consequences of her actions. She had always believed that she was doing the right thing, but now she was facing the possibility of a fine and a criminal investigation. Officer Miller handed Karen the citation. "You have the right to appeal this citation in court," she said. "As for the investigation, we will be in touch with you soon to schedule an interview." The officers then turned and walked back to their patrol car, leaving Karen standing on the sidewalk, stunned and bewildered. She watched as they drove away, the flashing lights of their car a stark reminder of the seriousness of her situation. She clutched the citation in her hand, her mind racing. She had never been in trouble with the law before, and she didn't know what to do. She felt like her world was collapsing around her. She thought about calling her husband, Bob, but she knew he would be furious. He had always warned her about her obsession with the HOA rules, and now his predictions were coming true. She thought about calling Agnes, the HOA president, but she knew that Agnes would be even more unsympathetic. Agnes had always been jealous of Karen's influence on the board, and now she had the perfect opportunity to get rid of her. Karen realized that she was all alone. She had alienated her friends, her family, and her neighbors with her overzealous enforcement of the rules. And now she was paying the price. She slumped down on her porch steps, tears streaming down her face. The weight of her actions finally crashed down on her. The fines, the investigation, the humiliation, it was all too much. Her meticulously constructed world, built on rules and regulations, had crumbled to dust. She spent the next few days in a daze, barely eating or sleeping. She replayed the events of the past few weeks in her mind, searching for a way to undo the damage. But there was no turning back. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. The investigation into her activities with the HOA intensified. The detectives interviewed her neighbors, reviewed her financial records, and scrutinized her every move. They uncovered a pattern of abuse and manipulation that was even worse than she had imagined. She had used her position on the board to settle personal scores, to harass her enemies, and to enrich herself at the expense of the community. She had violated the trust of her neighbors, and she had betrayed the principles of fairness and justice. As the evidence mounted, Karen realized that she had no choice but to confess. She contacted the detectives and offered to cooperate fully with their investigation. She admitted to misusing HOA funds, to harassing her neighbors, and to abusing her power. She knew that she would likely face criminal charges, but she was determined to take responsibility for her actions. She wanted to make amends for the harm she had caused, and she wanted to show her neighbors that she was truly sorry. The detectives were surprised by her willingness to confess. They had expected her to deny everything, but she was completely honest and forthcoming. They thanked her for her cooperation and assured her that they would take her confession into account when they made their decision about whether to file charges. A few weeks later, Karen was formally charged with several counts of embezzlement, harassment, and abuse of power. She pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to community service and probation. She was also ordered to repay the HOA for the funds she had misused and to undergo anger management counseling. Karen accepted her punishment without complaint. She knew that she deserved it. She had made a terrible mistake, and she was committed to making amends. She began her community service by volunteering at a local soup kitchen, serving meals to the homeless and working alongside people from all walks of life. She found that helping others gave her a sense of purpose and fulfillment that she had never experienced before. She also began attending anger management counseling, where she learned to control her temper and to communicate more effectively with others. She realized that her obsession with the HOA rules had been a way of controlling her own anxiety and insecurity. As she worked to rebuild her life, Karen realized that she had been given a second chance. She had lost her power, her prestige, and her reputation, but she had gained something even more valuable, a new perspective on life. She had learned that true happiness wasn't about following rules, it was about helping others. And she was determined to make the most of her second chance. Years later, Harmony Oaks was a different place. Sheriff Thompson, a beloved figure in the community, continued to serve with integrity and compassion. He was known for his fairness, his kindness, and his unwavering commitment to justice. He often joked about the firewood incident, using it as a reminder to himself and others to always be open-minded and to never jump to conclusions. The HOA, under new leadership, had become more inclusive and responsive to the needs of the residents. The rules were still in place, but they were enforced with a sense of fairness and understanding. The emphasis was on building community, not on imposing restrictions. Karen, a changed woman, had become a valuable member of society. She continued to volunteer her time at the soup kitchen, and she also worked as a mediator, helping to resolve conflicts between neighbors and within families. She had learned to use her organizational skills and her passion for justice to help others, instead of to control them. She had found true happiness in serving her community, and she was grateful for the second chance she had been given. One sunny afternoon, Karen was walking through Harmony Oaks when she saw a moving truck pulling up to a house down the street. She recognized the house as the one that had been vacant for several months. She watched as a family began unloading their belongings, a young couple with 2 small children. She smiled, remembering her own arrival in Harmony Oaks, so many years ago. She hesitated for a moment, then walked over to introduce herself. "Welcome to Harmony Oaks," she said, extending her hand to the young couple. "I'm Karen, and I live just down the street. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." The couple smiled and thanked her for her kindness. As Karen walked away, she felt a sense of peace and contentment wash over her. She had come a long way since her days as an overzealous HOA enforcer. She had learned from her mistakes, and she had found redemption in serving others. Harmony Oaks was finally a place of true harmony, a community where everyone was welcome and everyone was valued. And Karen, once the neighborhood pariah, had become one of its most cherished members. Her HOA power trip was long.